All right, guys, welcome back. If you're watching from the beginner lesson, welcome if you're just joining us. And today we're going to talk about a topic that we actually haven't covered much in our live lessons, and that's reading, and some practical tips you can use while reading. So before I go any further, right below the player that you're watching right now, if you can hear my voice speaking, is a little link to a download of the PDF of the patterns that we're going to be reading from. So it is a reading lesson. It's very important that you read from the PDF. Otherwise, this will make no sense at all. So what we're going to talk about is how to think about playing figures if you've never played figures before. Usually, if you're like in middle school or high school and you play in a big band, you have to start, your band director started expecting you to be able to read what they are called figures. This translates later on into like recording work and studio stuff as well. But we're talking about, when we say figures, what does that mean? Well, really all it means is different rhythms, like that some part of the band is playing that you have to play as well. So if we're thinking about like a big band chart, bing, ding, ba, ba, for ba, and that 1, 2, and is the figure. So that figure is what you need to figure out how to somehow play. Now, what do? Do we stop playing time and just play the rhythm? Do we try to play the rhythm on top of what we're already playing? Do we only do it with our foot? Do we hit the crash cymbal for the rhythm? These are the questions I'm hoping to shed some light on the answers to, and give you guys some direction that you can go with to start. So first of all, look at your PDF. We're going to start these out with as basic as we can. We're going to play something that most of us are probably familiar with, which is a rock beat. So our check pattern is going to go and what we're going to do for our intro, for our first step to playing figures, is all we're going to do is play them with our bass drum. So what does this do? Well, if you're playing in a band and you have some kind of thing that you need to be playing with everyone else, your bass drum is a good place to start because it doesn't take away from the feel, right? Because our feel is basically this. Right? If we're taking that as our core groove for this, we don't want to get rid of that if we can. If we can help it, we want to have So what we're going to do is play those figures with our bass drum, and you'll hear how it accentuates the figures without losing the feel. So we're going to do just the first line, and we'll play each measure 4 times. Okay? Here we go, playing the figures. All right, so that's it. It's pretty simple to start with. Just by focusing our bass drum on whatever we're reading as the figures on our chart, we already can keep that rock feel that we started out with, as well as play the figures and be musical in our playing. And that's awesome. Like, we have to be able to do those things as drummers and musicians. You can't just play time always, and you can't stop playing time to play a figure most of the time. That will break up the feel and it won't sound musical. So taking that same thread, we're going to play through the rest of this, lines 2 and 3, the same way. 4 times through each measure. So there you go. Like, the last two probably sounded way different, and there's a purpose to that. We're focusing primarily on like basic eighth note figures, but we are going to touch on a little bit on 16th note figures, which is what the last two measures are. So you can hear we never had to get rid of that fun the whole time. So if you're a listener, if you're not someone, because that's why we make music, is for people to listen to. They're not thinking about, oh, is that drummer playing the figure, or is he playing the figure with his snare drum or his bass drum? They don't care. What they care about is if it feels good and sounds good. So this is how to do that. This is the beginning steps to being able to do that. So now let's look at some variation, and this is going to remain primarily focused on the two 16th note ones at the end. And this is like a rock feel. So we have our basic undercurrent groove is this. So we don't always need to play it with just our bass drum. If we can catch one with our, like an E or an with our left hand on the snare, it will actually accomplish the same thing, and we can maybe make our bass drum a little bit more grounded. So if we look at the second to last measure, we're going to play, bass drum is going to basically play 1 and 3. Bass drum is going to do this. Now, if you're looking at the chart, you notice we're already playing 2 out of the 4 notes of the figure with our bass drum. So those other 2, we're just going to play with our left hand. 1 E, 2, 3 E, and a 4. 1 E, 2, 3 E, and a 4. And that accomplishes pretty much the same thing as this. So there you go. For the same figure, you now have 2 variations you can play. So if it's coming up, it's repeating itself over and over and over, you don't have to sound the same every time. Now you give yourself some variation and you can start to be creative with it. Let's look at the last one, the very last one on the page. 1 2 and 3 E 4. 1 2 2 ah 2 and 3 E 4. We can play a downbeat with our bass drum and still play most of those figures. We can play 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, and then play the E with our left hand. So there's even a couple more. I mean, I changed it up. I tried to change it a little bit every measure, every 2 measures. And that gives it a much more musical sound. And this is a good way to start approaching figures in a rock feel. That's like only the first part of it is like the rock feel. So think about keeping your hands the same and making your bass drum pick up some of the slack of the figures, right? Make your bass drum work a little bit harder to catch the figures. 16th note figures on the upbeat 16th notes, you can often catch with your left hand, and that sounds fine, and it's not better or worse than your right foot. Eventually, we'll talk about different instruments and what we should play for different instruments, but we're not even thinking about that yet. Right now, we're just thinking about playing the rhythms. So those are a couple variations you can use in a rock feel. So now let's take it to a different direction that someone in a jazz band in junior high or high school might be put in, where they have to play swing and catch figures. Now, you might not be super comfortable with swing, but the good thing is to play figures and swing, it's not actually that tricky if you get used to the basic pattern. So what is the basic jazz pattern? If you don't know this, you should eventually, wait till the end of the lesson, go click to Greg Bissonet's section in the lessons area of the site and go watch his jazz series, because he covers this in detail and he gives you a really good introduction to playing jazz. Jazz is really based on the ride cymbal. This pattern, 1 tita, 2 tita, 3 triplets, 4 tita, 1 tita, 2 tita, 3 tita, 4 tita, 1. Okay, so by keeping the hi-hat on 2 and 4 and keeping our right hand going, that's all we have to worry about to start playing figures. So for the beginning, what we're going to do is we're going to play all the figures with our left hand, and we're going to leave out the 16th note ones at the end. So we'll play 10 of these patterns. And I'm going to play them all with my left hand, and I'm hopefully not going to mess up, but if I do, it's not the end of the world. So right off the bat, you might be noticing some things that are a little bit trickier about playing these figures in a jazz feel. And the first thing is that ride cymbal pattern doesn't have the comfort. Like, I don't care how good you are at it, it's not going to have the same amount of comfort that on the hi-hat has. Because that means every time you play a figure, it's going to line up with your hi-hat. But the ride cymbal pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, doesn't play on the and of 1 or the and of 3. So if we look at these patterns, every time we see a figure on an and of 1 or an and of 3, you have to mentally realize that those aren't going to be with your right hand. They're not going to hit together. So if we look at number 3 there, 1, 2, 3, it's right, left, right, 3. And this is pretty important when you start getting into playing these figures in a jazz feel. Eventually, yes, you can change your ride cymbal pattern. You don't always have to play that. But you want to give yourself a strong foundation. So learn how to play these figures against the standard pattern, which means that anything that's not an upbeat of 1 or 3 is going to land with your right hand. If it's on the and of 1 or the and of 3, it's going to be all by itself. Nothing else is going to hit except that left hand. And that takes some getting used to, because eventually you're going to be going in between off and together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 4, 2, 3, 1. Okay, so take these patterns and really dive into them and start working them out slowly against these two patterns. Do it against the rock pattern, and then if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, maybe you've played in some big band, maybe you're playing in big band if you're just starting the school year, because I know the school year just started, it's been about a month now, and you're starting to play in big band, this is a really good place to start for developing the coordination and the sensibility. So that being said, the last thing we can do with this is play all the figures with our right foot. This is a little bit trickier because, generally speaking, our right foot is not as good as our hands because our hands move much faster and easier. But it's not impossible. So I'm going to pick up the tempo a little bit, and I'm going to play through these with my right foot. And my left hand's actually not going to do anything. So here we go, and I'm playing through 1 through 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I even hiccuped on those a little bit. But this is a really good way to, aside from learning how to play figures, you'll start developing a lot of coordination doing these as well. So take these, practice them at different tempos, practice them slow, practice them faster, but always keep them under control. Send us videos of you guys playing these figures, and we'd be more than happy to get you feedback on your playing. Make sure you guys are tuning in to our live lessons weekly. We do them twice a week, generally speaking, but we do 3 lessons. And you're welcome to chime in, ask questions, and get them asked personally, like while we're giving the lesson. So hope to see you guys again next week, and happy drumming. Keep going at it.